the continuation of making the stock from the carcasses after we bone the turkey. We have all those scraps that we put inside the pot from just a minute ago when we boned the turkey, and now we're going to, I remember I got all the skin and the stuff from the roasting pan inside this pot, and now we're going to put the carcass inside this pot. We're going to try to find the easiest way, which is to cut the breastbone off of the backbone. You see what I just did? Yeah, that came off so nice and easy. And now, carefully, I'm going to cut this into pieces. That's big enough for me. I don't feel like cutting my hand off today. All these pieces and put them in the pot. It's going to make a great stock. And I think that's good enough. Stuff that in there. Let's get all these scraps off the table in there. And mirepoix, celery, carrots, and onions I have chopped up here. This is the same formula for the chicken stock video that we've done, and you can see. And I'm going to mix the celery, carrots, and onions in there. This is going to be cooking on the stove for a number of hours, 4, 5, 6 hours, something like that. I have some parsley roots on hand, so I'm deciding to throw those in there. They're certainly an important part of making the stocks. But of course, if you want to learn about stocks, you go look at the stock and sauce class, and it'll teach you all you want to know. Now we're going to put some garlic in there. Probably got about a half a cup to 3/4 of a cup of garlic. I have some dried Dalmatian sage. Now I'm putting that in here because I'm going to use this stock exclusively for the turkey sauce or turkey gravy. And I want a little bit of sage in there. So I'm going to put a little bit of sage in there. And I have some dried leaf thyme. And we're going to put a couple of tablespoons of that inside the stock. Now I'm going to swing this over to the stove. I'm going to cover it with cold water like I do all stocks that begin with cold water. And we're going to simmer it at a high simmer but not a boil, because this is a poultry stock. And you can simmer it a little bit faster than you might a bone beef stock. And we're going to skim it off and to skim the fat throughout the process. And about midway through, I'll bring you back to the stock pot and I'll show you. But for right now, I'm going to put it on the stove and get the water on it. Cold water, which is what you always begin with. Beautiful. Now you make sure that it's completely covered and you don't have a bunch of meat or bones sticking out of the water, of course. And we'll bring that to a simmer. We'll skim it. We'll come back to it later. And that's what we're going to make that gravy out of when this is the roasted turkey stock. So I'll be back later, kind of like right now. All right, that turkey stock has been simmering for a long time. I guess we got about 6 or 7 hours into this pot already. And I've been skimming it here, and this has been my little scum pot down here. And I'm going to take the last layer of fat off of here, and then we're going to strain it and begin that process for the gravy. So I think I got enough of it off of there. So I'm going to take the pot, and I have my saucepan right here, if you can come down on that. And we're going to strain that right into there. I don't want any of those big bones falling in there. They'll topple right over the pot. Okay, I think I got it all. Now, let's take this and let's take a peek at what we got here. Okay, now we're going to reduce this by 50%, and I'll be back to begin that process with you in a second. Okay, that strained stock that's in the saucepan now, which we're going to have to reduce for 50%. And this, of course, is going to make a really nice stock. But part of the reason it's going to is because we're going to enhance it. We're going to enrich it. And the two ways that we're going to do that mainly is first, we're going to reduce this turkey juice down to 50% initially before we add some roux, and then then we're going to do a little bit more cleansing of the gravy as it goes along and continues to reduce. But on the onset, the beginning part of the process, now after it's strained, includes us sauteing a little bit of mushroom. Whoa, that's a little bit hot, but that's okay. It ain't that hot. The recipe calls for a little bit of sauteed mushroom. We're going to put just a pinch of salt and pepper in the mushroom. We're going to add this basically to the stock here in a minute. And we're going to allow the stock to simmer. I don't know how long it's going to take, and there's no absolute prescription for the amount of time, but it's probably going to take, for this amount of stock right here, it'll probably take an hour to get about halfway reduced, depending on how quickly you want to reduce it. Of course, in the thickening agents and liaisons video, I go into a little bit more depth about some of the nuances associated with reducing the stock. But again, I'll remind you that whenever you're making a sauce from the stock, part of that, I'm going to add the mushrooms to the stock now, and we'll let the stock just cook away there. Part of that cleansing process that needs to take place, I refer to it as a cleansing process just because of an absence of any other way to describe it, because the insoluble particles that ultimately are in the stock, those that are not soluble with water, they're going to come to the surface in the form of scum, and we're going to remove them with a ladle. I'm going to bring you in and out a couple of times, I believe, when over the course of this stock being reduced and finished, so you can see that actually taking place. I guess the best difference between a turkey gravy and a turkey sauce is one that's a little bit more refined, and that's what we're going to show you how to do today. So I'll be back in probably about half an hour, 45 minutes, and we'll take a look and see how the reduction process is going. And then when it gets to the right point, of course, we're going to add a little bit of roux, and then eventually we're going to add a little bit of butter and a little bit of reduced cream, or cream that's not reduced. We could do it either way. So I'll be back in a little while right now. Okay, this is a turkey stock reducing checkpoint time. So if you could zero in on the stock down here, Richard, let me just show our people that the scum that has been accumulating, which has been removed, and there hasn't been very much, and I got to tell you why. That's because when we made this stock, it was well skimmed out, and we're pretty close to adding the roux, but I wanted to show you how far down it's reduced. It's just about 50% down now, and we'll be back in probably about 5 minutes to finish this off. We're going to add some roux to it, and we'll probably add a little bit of cream to it, and then we'll do a little butter, and then we'll have a finished sauce, and you're really going to like it. So I'll be back soon. All right, we're back to do one more step in the completion process for the gravy slash sauce for the turkey gravy. Okay, our gravy, or excuse me, our stock has reduced about 50% now, and I'm getting ready to make what we call a little beurre mayonnaise, which is flour and butter or oil that isn't really cooked, just mixed together, okay? And we're going to use that as the thickening agent for the gravy, okay? So I have a little melted butter here, and of course you can get more information about the roux and the thickening agents, because you don't have to use roux. You can use cornstarch or arrowroot or mashed potatoes if you want in your gravy. But for today we're going to make it with the roux, which is equal parts butter and flour mixed together, or oil, okay? So I have some all-purpose flour here, and I got a little bit of melted butter. I'm going to dump it together. I don't have to measure this because I put the right amount of flour in, and then I know when I get to the right texture of the roux that I have the right amount of flour in, because it reaches a certain texture. You can always add a little bit extra of the flour if you wanted to, which is what I'm going to do right there, okay? Let me shut that off. Now this is what we call beurre mayonnaise, okay? That is uncooked roux. All right, so we're going to add the roux right in to the reduced stock. And I'm going to whisk it in. And we're going to give this a few minutes to thicken up. And at this point, this is when, here, Richard, come up to me now. At this point, when you're reducing this sauce, the skimming process is much more important because now all of these impurities from the flour have been added to this stock. And so now there are a lot of things that are not soluble with water anymore that are in here. I mean, it was fully skimmed out and cleansed, as I referred to it earlier, prior to adding the roux. But now we just added some stuff to the stock that needs to be skimmed out again. So we're going to skim this here as it's reducing. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. And I'll bring you back to this in about 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes as it starts to accumulate scum. And I'll show you how I'm removing that. And then we'll probably at that point go right into the finishing of the sauce. And we'll talk about the butter and the cream being added. Okay? We'll be right back. Let's get rid of that non-TV towel. All right, you ready?
Perfect.
Okay. The finishing of the turkey gravy. Okay. I changed the saucepan. It was a little too big. Got it into a smaller pan so I could get the scum to accumulate along the side of the pan. Besides, you don't want to cook 2 quarts or 1.5 quarts of sauce or gravy in an 8-quart pan because there's problems associated with that, of course, that are covered in a different video, which I don't want to get into right now. But if you come down here to the sauce, I can show them how I had the saucepan sitting on the burner in such a way as that it caused a turbulence within the sauce itself to force all the scum, which is what this is. These are the insoluble particles. And I've already removed a little bit of them since we last came in and shot on this. They're removed, and that's part of the cleansing of the sauce. And that never really changes for any sauce that you might be making, okay? Now, I tasted the sauce a little bit already, and it tastes fine. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the basic finishing process for this sauce. Now, right here, I have a strainer, and I have a large bowl so you can see this process a little bit more easily. We're going to strain the gravy. Or I suppose we may have to call it sauce, but I think traditionally we want to call this gravy because this is a Thanksgiving kind of thing, okay? And now we're going to slide this over here a little bit. All right, now those mushrooms, just like all vegetables that are used inside of sauces to extract flavor, are kind of void of color and texture now. Although you could keep them in there, I generally would take them out. And if I wanted mushrooms in my gravy, I'd saute some more fresh ones so they were kind of nice and just cooked looking and put them inside the gravy for garnish if I felt I wanted the mushrooms in there. But you can use the mushrooms in there, but I have a tendency to strain them out, and I think you need to understand that that's the most refined approach to doing it, not necessarily the most economical. But then again, some of these foods that we make require the extract of certain things that may not necessarily be economical all the time. So now we're going to cut back down to the gravy, Richard. Now we're going to add a couple of ounces of butter per quart. And that is probably about enough right there. This, of course, is an option for you if you'd like to add that. Now the recipe calls for cream to be reduced and added to that. Now the reason that is because we want the texture of the cream to be close to the texture of the sauce. But I think this sauce can take some regular cream that's unreduced added to it. You can also add some of your cream. Now it's starting to look a little bit more like turkey gravy. Now, I'm going to take a taste of that real quick. It tastes good, and this particular sauce does not need any more salt and pepper, and it's not over. It doesn't have any, there's no too much salt flavor in this gravy right now at all. For some reason, it just came out perfect without adding any more to it. So what I would do is, now you could store this from the day before and reheat this, or you can just simply pour this into your gravy boat, and you are good to go. Now, Something I'd like to say about the texture of your gravy. Now, we have a lot of tendencies out there to have this be a little bit too thick. You'll notice how I made this. I didn't add what I think would be too much roux. I like the gravy to be a little bit more sauce-like. And remember, this particular gravy is more of a concentrated sauce. So you don't need probably as much. So having it be thinner in this particular case might be better because they're not getting larger amounts of it. When it's thicker, it has a tendency to stick to the food more, and when it's a little bit thinner, it has a tendency to run off. And the person who's eating their food with the gravy can then decide how much of the gravy they want to marry with each bite by washing it in it a little bit. Okay, so there's some turkey gravy. And I hope you enjoy it. This is kind of like the most natural way to make turkey gravy, and that is with the stock from the carcasses of the roasted turkey. So enjoy your gravy and have a great Thanksgiving too while you're at it, if that's what you're doing.